Hello everyone, my name is Luisa and this is the Lulu Blue Studio. Welcome to day 11 of this 20-day flower creation journey. Today we are going to paint together a statice. A statice is a plant with round shaped flowers, ruffled edges and very bright in color. We are going to paint them in pink. So to start to create these flowers, I take my filbert brush in size 8 and I take a little bit of magenta and a little bit of red. With the belly and the side of my brush, I start to create the overall shape of these flowers. So I am just touching and pressing onto the paper the side and the belly of the brush, and I lay on the paper just the first layer of these flowers. What I am trying to do in first step is to create an overall shape of the flowers that I see on the picture in front of me. I will not be too precise following the overall shape, but I will be careful to create flowers that resemble the picture that I see in front of me. The very first layer of this color, a mixture of red and magenta, red is the Scarlet Lake, changes in color values. In some areas I created these flowers with a darker color value, so I have a concentrated amount of pigment, but in some other areas I am careful to remove part of the pigment into my cup of water and to lay onto the paper just a very light value of this color. And I keep adding onto the wet first layer some more concentrated amount of magenta or Scarlet Lake. I keep adding onto the paper these very simple brush strokes, and I remember to just touch the paper with the side of the brush or with the belly of the brush. These brush strokes are very simple, but I think they can be used in many different compositions for many different flowers. So I believe that exercising these brush strokes with the statice are a great example to improve the brush strokes for other flower compositions as well. I am dragging a little bit of pigment that is not very concentrated because I have a high amount of water onto my brush, and therefore I create color values that are much lighter compared to other parts of this composition. I think that one way to create a very vibrant and beautiful composition, even if we are just practicing with one type of flower, is to lay onto paper different values of the colors we are using and different hues, that means different colors overall. When I speak about color value, I mean to change basically the intensity of what the color that I have on my brush looks like. When on my brush the amount of pigment is very concentrated, the value is darker. When I remove a part of the same color into my cup of water, the same color will have a lighter value. That means that there are less pigments and more water onto my brush. Therefore, the color that I'm going to have onto paper is going to be lighter. One other tip that I want to give you when you create flower compositions is to remember to change the color hue. The color hue is in fact the color in itself, and in order to change the color, you can add to the brush different amounts of colors. For example, in this case, different amounts of magenta and Scarlet Lake. In this way, you will create different colors and the composition is going to be beautiful to look at, especially at the end when the paint is going to be completely dry. So up until now, I've laid onto paper the whole first layer of these flowers just by using my filbert brush and creating an overall shape of these flowers. I've used different color values and different hues, and at this point I take my round brush in size 6 and I start instead to create these fine stems that collect these bunches of flowers and start from the base of the page and reach the top. So one tip that I'd like to give you when you approach a flower composition and maybe you look at a reference picture is to understand what are the general shapes of the flowers you are going to paint. So you're going to look at a reference picture and, for example, if you look at a rose, the rose has a general round shape. If you look, for example, at this Statice, also it's a round shape, but with ruffled edges. So my recommendation is, when you paint flowers in loose style, to start from these basic and simple shapes. Understand which flowers you have in front of you and which shapes these flowers have, and then try to recreate, as I said, in a loose style. So this means that it doesn't have to be too precise what you're going to paint onto your paper. Try to reproduce these shapes and try to add details at a second stage when you start to add your second layer of paint. While I'm adding these stems, I look at the reference picture and I try to understand how to connect these flowers, but I also look at how I've placed these bunches of flowers, and clearly I understand where to add these very thin stems that are connecting these flowers. So look at your reference pictures, but also look at what you have painted. When you are painting a loose style flower composition out of a reference picture, you, of course, are very welcome to create exactly what the reference picture is, but you can also have fun and just experiment with colors and with strokes, brush strokes, and you can create something that is slightly different or even quite different from what you see on a reference picture. The main objective of this 20-day flower creation journey is to show you and to inspire you on how to create some brush strokes that can be used for different flowers. So, for example, the brush strokes that we are going to use for these Statice flowers can be used also for other flowers that are just out of your imagination or real flowers that exist in nature. I really hope that during this 20-day flower creation journey, all of these flower composition inspire your imagination and your creativity to experiment, explore, and try something that maybe you have never tried in the past. As I finish defining the stems of these flowers, I also add a little bit of leaves. As I see, the leaves are very small in size and in quite long and in round shape. Feel free to add them if you like. They are not so big, so if you wanted to skip this part, you can easily avoid creating these leaves. Just one part that I always like to add to my composition is to add some contrasting colors, so some colors that are a little bit darker compared to what I have already added onto paper. So in this case, I just add onto these stems, which are pretty simple, a little bit of darker green that I've obtained by mixing a little bit of sap green with a little bit of magenta and a little bit of blue. And I just touch some areas of these stems, and I will allow this darker green to blend with the sap green that is the first layer, still wet, onto paper. And now the fun part. I take my mop brush and I'm going to take a little bit of magenta and red. This is Scarlet Lake. And with this mixture, I just touch with the tip of my brush the areas where I have created the first layer of paint, and I start to layer the second, layer of paint, and I started to give a little bit the impression that these flowers have ruffled edges. I prefer to use a mop brush because the way this mop brush is formed has that the tips of the brush are not super tight, and so I can create these ruffled edges in a very simple way. Indeed, you can try to achieve the same result, for example, with the tip of a round brush. Since I have available this mop brush, I will use it because I have the impression these fine points basically that I'm creating are going to be more loose compared to using just a round brush. But you can try, for example, to create the same with a round brush and let me know in the comments below what you think. As I am adding this second layer of paint, I use always the same approach. I remember to change the color value and the color hue of the colors that I'm using with this mop brush. Therefore, I'm going to lay, just by tapping with the tip of my brush the paper, different areas with different color values and colors overall that will give more dimension to these Statice flowers. The Statice flower, or something similar to this, can be a perfect fill-in flowers for your flower compositions. So, for example, using flowers with this definition, where the flowers and the edges are more ruffled, will for sure give a different impression and something very nice to look at compared to having a composition where all the flowers are just created in the same way. So what I'm trying to say is consider adding these fill-in flowers, something like Statice, to your flower compositions because they really can add a beautiful touch due to their beautiful and different shape and due to their ruffled edges. I keep adding some more definition on some edges, and I also like to leave just some areas without any tip of my mop brush. In this way, in some areas, just the wet on wet technique that I've used to lay the first layer is going to be shown, and is going to be a different contrast between the ruffled edges and the flat colors of the first layer. And we have reached the end of this tutorial. I hope to see you on day 12. Bye!